so high, I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right.
I wanted to give a lesson on how to start riding from the very beginning. On the left side, you have your shift lever. On the left side also you have your clutch hand lever. The right side foot is your rear brake, and on the right side hand you have your front brake. Alright, first you turn on the bike. This is the kill switch. Right now it's on kill. You have to turn it down to here, but you can see I'm in first gear. You could also check to see if you're in first gear or in gear by trying to rock without pulling anything. Trying to rock the bike, it stops itself. That's how you know you're in gear. You want to hold the clutch in and kick up. Neutral is between first and second gear, so it's kind of like a half nudge to get it into neutral. Mind you, you just hold in the clutch when you're shifting all the way in. So while holding the clutch, sometimes it won't want to go up. You try it and it won't. So sometimes you have to rock it back and forth a little bit to get it to go up. Kawasaki has, I forget what they call it. They have it so you can't go in a second when you're stopped. You can keep clicking up. It's not going to go in a second. It's a neutral lock or something like that. So this is different than some other bikes. Some other bikes, when you click up all the way, it'll just go straight to second. So you kind of got to find that in between, be a little light on it, nudge it into neutral. Okay, you're in neutral. You want to kick up your kickstand. You can start, I think, without the clutch. Yeah, without the clutch lever. But when you start it, you really want to hold in the clutch lever because you can have false readings. I slowly let it out just in case it was in gear. You'll feel it start pulling. Pull it back in, re-kick the lever, make sure you're in gear. You can also start in first gear or any gear. You can start in gear. I'll show you. Click it down. This is the button to start. But you have the kickstand down, so it won't start. Many modern bikes have a kickstand kill switch, so you don't take off in gear with the kickstand down. Kick it up, and you can start it. Hold in the clutch in. That's for first gear. Now, usually though, when you start it, you want to be in neutral, so you don't accidentally start it in gear and then take off or stall it or whatever. It's just easier. Okay, the hardest part is taking off. The gears go. Hold the clutch, make sure you don't let it out, it's running. Down one, then up halfway goes to neutral. Then I can't do it here unless I'm moving, but you go up 5 more times to through all the gears. When you're moving, it won't go to neutral usually. You got to make sure you give it a firm kick up. It'll just go straight from first to second and then all the way up. When starting to learn how to ride, I don't use any throttle, and you just want to let out the clutch slowly, the lever, and you feel it start pulling. It's pulling now, and if you keep going slowly and hold it in the midpoint, it'll just start going on itself. Now you're just starting, so I wouldn't want to actually start rolling like that. You just want to get a feel for where the friction zone is. About halfway through the pull, if you put it in neutral again, you can see, okay, the clutch lever goes out this much. Somewhere halfway in there, the friction zone, you can feel the friction zone start pulling. Now if you let out too fast, you stall it. I'll stall it real quick. Stalled. That's too fast, especially with no throttle. You can start it back up, clutch in, but you just want to feel it pull on the friction zone a little bit and just walk with it. Okay, you feel it, pull it back in, press the brake. Make sure you have your clutch lever pulled in, and when you press the brake, If you hold the brake with it still out, you'll stall it. Your clutch lever pulled in is always your safe zone. I'll put it in neutral for a second. Whenever you're feeling overwhelmed, so long as you're sitting up straight doing this, when you're feeling overwhelmed, pull in your clutch. That's home sweet home. Pull in your clutch and then make a decision. You could be rolling like, oh no, I don't know what to do. Pull in your clutch. Now you can make a decision on to brake, to keep going, whatever. But whenever you feel overwhelmed, pull in your clutch when going straight. Now if you're turned over and all that stuff, you can still do it, but you'll lose power. Anyway, we'll get to that later. We're starting with just filling the friction zone. You want to do this a ton of times. No gas. Fill, start pulling, pull it back in. No gas. Fill, start pulling, pull it back in. And make sure your hands are on the bars. My hands are off when I'm talking. You fill it pulling, pull it back in and brake. You fill it pulling, walk a little faster, pull it in, brake. You're always safe when you pull in the clutch. Now, later on, when you start getting that, you can add a tiny bit of a throttle to it. Now, throttle is weird. When you have your clutch in or you're on neutral, you hear it. You give it all this and it'll start revving up. But once you start letting out the clutch, you'll feel it change the way it responds. But when giving throttle, make sure your wrist is bent like this when you grip it. Bend your wrist down and then grip it, because when it takes off, if you're cranked like this, it'll pull you back and you'll twist the throttle more. So bend your wrist down, grab it, so that way you can only twist a little bit. Now, I kicked it down into first with my clutch in. Okay, so we let out, we feel the friction zone, give it a little bit of throttle while we're slowly letting it out. Go straight, pull the clutch back in, and slowly press the front brake and stop. You'll do it again. I would not do it this close to a curb, but I know what I'm doing. So you let out the throttle, feel the friction, slowly. It's starting to pull me. Little bit of throttle, pull the clutch back in, give you time, you're cruising, you slowly brake, put your feet down. So I think kind of understanding a little bit of how a clutch works helps you understand what the bike's doing. Now, I'm not the greatest mechanical person. I know how it works in a layman sort of way, but this is what I know, and it's helped me understand it over time. So when your engine's running, it's spinning your clutch, and that is spinning your drive gears, which is your chain. It's hooked to your chain, and that's what propels you to go forward. The engine spins the clutch, which spins the drive gears to spin the chain, to spin the wheels, and you go. Now when you pull in your clutch, you're in gear, you pull it in, the engine is still spinning the clutch, but it separates from the drive gears. So now the drive gears are stationary, clutch is spinning, and you're not moving. When you let out, these are spinning, your clutch, and it mates up with the drive gear, and they start spinning together. And when you're halfway through, it's kind of meshing, clutch is slipping on it. Anyway, just know that when you pull in, you're removing all the power from you actually driving. Once you start really testing the friction zone, you got to come to a parking lot like this and just do it over and over. First start walking with it, take a half an hour. I guess I should have talked about stopping. Stopping is probably a big deal. It's probably a bigger deal than starting. So You're going, you want to pull in, let off the throttle, pull in your clutch, coast, and then start pulling in gently the front right lever and the bottom foot lever, both of them equally, smoothly, until you stop. Your front brake lever controls some like 70-80% of your stopping power, but it's good to get in the habit of using the rear brake too, because when you need it, when you need that extra 20% of stopping power, it'll be there so you can stop quickly before slamming into a curb, car, whatever. So when you're practicing in a straight line, because straight lines are easier, if you're turned over and you grab the brakes, you're falling down. So when first starting out, you want to be straight line, pull lever in, nice and smooth on the brakes, both feet down. After you get going straight, you can then get into shifting. Now when you shift, like I said with the clutch, however however badly I explain the clutch, just know it's spinning and the other shit's spinning and whatever. And it separates when you pull the clutch in. That's what you need to do when shifting. So you're in first gear, you pull the clutch lever in, it separates so you can shift now. Now, if it's together, you don't pull it in and you try to kick up on your shifting lever, you could be doing damage to your engine because it's spinning with all this force. You try to kick up, it's trying to shift while all this stuff is spinning, applying force. You're going to break something eventually. When you're going in first gear, pull the clutch in and at the same time cut your throttle. You give it a nice firm up kick to shift it into second, then you let out again. But when letting out this time, since you're already moving, you don't need to baby it out like this. You don't need to baby it out like first gear. That's only taking off from a stop. Taking off from a stop, you baby it out, go, and then now I'll clutch in, kick up to second, and just let out and continue with my throttle. So again, to shift, you start in first gear, let out the clutch halfway, get a little throttle, start going. You got to get up to a little bit of speed. You see all these numbers, 1,000 RPM, 10,000 RPM, 10,500 is a red line, or 11,000 something. You don't want to be up there. You want to be somewhere in the middle. You want to get up to 4, 5, clutch in, shift up, clutch, just let it out, back on the throttle. When you go from first to second, you pull in the clutch, but you have to let off the throttle too. Don't want to keep on the throttle because you do this. I got to make this turn. Don't turn when trying all this stuff. Try just going straight. You're in first gear, pulling the clutch while you let off the throttle, then you can shift up. I waited too long, so it's not a smooth shift, but I'm trying to talk. Shift up, let out the clutch, back on the throttle. I'm going to do it this time without explaining so I could do it faster. And then it's just like that from every shift on. You don't have to baby it out. You just drop the clutch. Make sure you're getting like halfway in your RPMs. Shift to third. Once you start going up these gears, we're in third now, we'll go to fourth. Now, once you start slowing down, you're gonna really be too slow for your gear. Each gear has a speed it's comfortable in. On this Ninja 500, let's see, first gear, get up to 35, 40 probably, redline it. But really, first gear on this, I mean, on most bikes, just starting out, 20 miles an hour is probably where it's most comfortable. Like I said earlier, First gear is too jerky. You don't want to be riding around in first gear. Unless you're in a parking lot where, you know, you got to go really, really slow. You're in first gear and you're really just going slow. This is once you're good. You can balance, you can look around for your parking spot and all that. Then maybe you have first gear. But pretty much every other time, you'll at lowest be in second until you come to a stop again. Then you'll go down to first and take off in first again. When I first started riding, my buddy told me first gear is first starting out, then you never go back to first again. Now what he meant, what I found out later after weeks of riding or whatever, is once you're actually riding like this, you're never going back down to first again. At lowest you'll be second because you'll slow down, you have to go to second because you're slow, whatever, but you're not going to be riding around like this going to first. I took him just at his word that you're never going to first again. Well, you are going to first again once you stop. Coming up to a stoplight, we're in second, we stop, pulling the clutch, press the brakes, you're still in second, fine. Now you can click down to first because you want to be in first again when you take off. You can technically take off in second, but you're going to be burning up your clutch a lot more. Now as you get better, you can let out the clutch quicker and quicker, stop babying it so much, but there's like a little formula in there to get it just right. The longer you take to let out the clutch, the smoother it's going to be, the less throttle you really need to give to get going. But the quicker you let out the clutch, you're going to have to give more throttle. First gear, I'm just going to let it out pretty quickly. I had to give it a lot of throttle because if you just give a little bit of throttle and dump the clutch, you're going to stall it. It's a give and take. You can slowly let out the clutch and give it a little bit of throttle and you'll be taking off fine. But if you're dumping the clutch, you have to give it more throttle to just power through it, make sure it has enough gas to sustain itself to get going.